To the webinar, it's number 3 in my series. Stoked to have a guest here to talk to as well. We've got Mr. Matthew Gilligan this evening, but before I get into that, I've got to do the normal disclaimer stuff. This is not financial advice. This is commentary and rhetoric and ideas. We're going to tell you exactly what we think, but don't take it as financial advice. If you need financial advice, please see a financial advisor. Glad to see so many people on board and made it. This webinar series has been more and more popular every week. People are crying out for some idea of what's going on out there. And that's why I'm so stoked for this evening's guest. We've got Mr. Matthew Gilligan, chartered accountant for 25 years, trusts, entities, trusts, and I would say the normal accountant stuff, but he's bloody amazing at what he does, and also a very talented long-term property investor and developer and author of a couple of books on property and tax and structures. Welcome along, Matthew.
Very kind words, Steve. Thank you very much, and thanks for inviting me along.
Absolutely, of course. And
right back at you, by the way. You're very good at what you do. I've been so impressed with your online presence and your workshops and your guidance of your students over the years. You're doing a great job there.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed working with you for, God, thick part of a decade and a bit now. So
yeah, it's a long time. Just a reminder, Steve, I've got one of my professional colleagues of GRA arriving at 8 o'clock. He'll be a surprise for us, so we'll be able to chat to him as well.
Nice to have a special guest. So this evening was pitched as talking about DTIs, and we are actually absolutely going to get into debt to income restrictions very shortly. But something very topical happened today with the Reserve Bank, the OCR result, as predicted by everybody but ANZ. They left the Reserve Bank interest rate as it is. What do you think they got up to there, Matt?
Well, people asked me what I thought would happen, and I said that I thought they would hold the OCR. I thought, my view is if you want to work out what the market's going to do, just do the opposite to what ANZ and Westpac say.
Yep.
I reckon they're just sucking up to the regulators. Those guys, they just they say some crazy stuff. And do you remember? At the top of the last boom, after ANZ pumped as much debt as they did into the market, they came out and said that New Zealand investors were a disgrace and that they, wouldn't tolerate further bad behaviour from New Zealand investors. Their CEO was pushing it back on the market, but who lent the money? They lent it. So I haven't. I'm not a huge fan of what their economists say. I quite like Jared Kerr. He seems a bit more measured. And I do think that the Reserve Bank reports quarterly, and there's a big lag between what's happening on the street getting reported to them, and that I think is a disconnect. But I'm very pleased that they didn't push rates up today, because what we're seeing is blood on the streets. We're seeing distress in households. We've got a large client base, 10,000 entities we act for. And we're a good paravane, a good barometer for what's going on. We get a front row seat to it before it's reported in the Herald. And sales are down, consumer spending's down. Our clients are hurting. Our property clients are not able to sell if they're exposed to the spot rates as they come off their fixed interest contracts. It's stressful for them. Yeah. And so a theme I've been talking to you before come online tonight. I'm really very unhappy with the Reserve Bank and Adrian Orr and what they did post-COVID. They pumped the market with low interest rates and loose liquidity, really overdrove the market low. A 5-year-old could work out it was going to create a massive house price inflation problem. Yep. Nonetheless, it made the government of the time very popular and the Reserve Bank popular. And here we are 2-3 years later. The rug has been pulled out from under investors. The Reserve Bank is grinding the hell out of households and businesses, causing no end of harm, I think structural damage, to fix Adrian Orr's inflationary mistake of 2020. It's terrible. Yep. And, make no bones about this. Our Reserve Bank governor made a mistake. He's not a steady hand on the tiller of the economy. And he's pumped the hell out of the housing market, created a massive problem in New Zealand, and we're paying for it now. We're suffering. And the instability is coming out of the Reserve Bank. The the actual banking institutions have done a sterling job. They stress tested at 3 times the interest rates on the day. And that's actually what's holding the banking system together, not the Reserve Bank governor's good guidance. Because now we're facing interest rates at triple, with the OCR being pushed up, and the banks have planned for it, and self-regulation is working, which is why I'm unsure that we need the DTIs in New Zealand. I think that the banks are doing a great job. We're the envy of the world, our banking system, for its stability and for its low default rates.
Yep.
So I think good move, not pushing rates up. I think that was jawboning, and fair enough. They need to quell inflation. That is the medicine that the country needs to get rid of inflation. But rates need to come down, and they need to come down quickly, because we're doing structural damage. Example, this morning, one of my team here, Celeste Chand, is a partner at GRA. He was speaking to a doctor. I wrote this down. And she was giving a reference to a colleague, Steve, who was migrating to Australia. And on the form, there was a very clever box, tick if you would be interested in migrating to Australia. So she ticked the box. The recruiter hounded her. Long story short, she got offered a role over there, double income, less hours, and she's off.
Wow.
And so, and so it's rife. We're losing our talent over there because the Reserve Bank is just making New Zealand hell for many households. Of course, if there's no debt in your household, it's not hell, but a lot of people just getting on the property ladder, or getting out of university, or getting going, that are exposed to these rates, it's hard here, and incomes are low. So it's not good. We're doing structural damage. Developers are going broke at the moment. They would otherwise have survived if rates were kept low. So we've got peak migration. We need to be building houses. These developers are going out of the market. It's just all upside down, and it's interest rate driven.
And Adrian Orr is seemingly getting credit for fixing the catastrophe that he's created himself.
Oh, exactly.
And we've got 165,000 net immigration, but the people that we are losing is all of the talented people that are prized offshore, and we're replacing them with less talented immigrants that we absolutely 100% need to keep the economy moving. But as you say, we've got nowhere to put them. They're talking 165,000 net immigration, 100,000 landing in Auckland alone. And I'm just sitting here going, well, where are these people going to live? Resource contents have halved. Developers are running scared because they can't sell the stock they've already got to start new stuff. And my pitch is that my thing is, after 3 cycles in the economy, what happens next? What happens at this part of the market? And in this part of the market, what happens next? And you can see it on Trass's property cycle, is a boom in rent. And when rents boom at this point, your tenants can't afford it. They're just not keeping up.
That's exactly what's going on in Auckland. You've got huge demand from all the immigration coming in, but they can't afford to buy the houses. A lot of them are not permanent residents, so they can't get OIA approval to buy the houses. And I don't see a lot of economists talking about that, but that is a problem. So they're coming in, temporary migrants, they can't buy, so they rent. Massive rental demand. Rents are going through the roof, I know, because my portfolio in Auckland's benefiting from that. And that's bad. And so you lose the demand stimulus to developers, because there's actually surplus housing stock sitting around. It doesn't sell because there's no rental return. And it won't be until the rents get up to a point where we can entice the developers back in, or much more likely interest rates come down and you see that demand stimulus return.
Yeah, and it's got to be interest rates coming down. It's the biggest stimulus package that the property economy has. And they've got more tools with loan-to-value ratio restrictions, but they're only tweaking those really slightly, and it just doesn't make any difference except for people like yourself and me. Loan-to-value ratio restrictions of 5% tweak only helps you if you've got 10 plus houses to any measurable amount.
Yeah, it is interesting. John Key this morning, he said that house prices, he thinks, will double in the next 10 years, and it kicks off the second half of this year as interest rates get dropped. And I actually think that's one of the key pieces of DTIs, which we're going to discuss, not to preempt it tonight, and that is that when DTIs come in, it will open options for the Reserve Bank, because they'll be able to drop interest rates and take the pressure off households without creating housing bubbles, because that's when they'll be most active.
Yep, more tools. Love that. Well, so we're talking about official cash rates, talking about interest rates. We know there's a lot of people out there going to come off 2 and 3% over the next 12, 24 months. What's your recommendation for people that have to go to a floating rate of 8% or fix at 7.5%? What advice would you give people if they had $500,000 coming off onto a floating rate in the next sort of 6 months' time?
Easy to get this advice wrong, so talk to your financial advisors. But I think it's pretty obvious rates have to come down, or it's going to kill the New Zealand economy. And if he doesn't bring them down, he'll get thrown out. So I would be fixing short, and if you can cope with that for 6 to 10 months, you'll be in the money next year. So don't take the long rates; you'll regret it.
Agree. And I think that they're trying to entice us with slightly lower, longer rates, because they know that that's what's going to happen as well. Because, banks are all about shareholders and making profits. So if I had a $500,000 mortgage at the moment like that I was worried about, I'd do maybe half on 6 months, half on 12 months. But the first thing I would do is speak to my mortgage advisor and get some solid advice.
Yep.
Excellent. Well, look, we said we're going to talk about
in 20 minutes, my mate's going to turn up. So I want to rip through some stuff before he does.
Excellent. Let's do that.
Right. Quick intro. I'm Matt Gilligan. I am MD at Gilligan Rowe, who are property accountants and general chartered accountants. So we act for businesses and property people. People like us, we're authentic in that we all invest here. Celeste Chan and myself and two of the partners, we have sizable property portfolios buy to hold. We develop houses too. I did an 80-lot subdivision in Darfield last year. I built 8 houses in Auckland last year. I'm building a lot more this year, so I'm quite buoyed by what I see in the future. I'm consenting and setting up my contracts to build at the moment. I'm not pushing the button on the builds till I get a feel for what happens later in the year, but I would say second half of this year I'll be building. So when you talk with us, you're actually dealing with people in the market doing stuff that makes us authentic and makes our advice real. We're doing what you guys do. So a little bit about DTIs. What are they? Well, it's a debt ratio that looks at your debt and multiplies it by it multiplies the debt ratio times by your income to get the maximum amount of debt that you're allowed to borrow. So, for example, the residential lending in New Zealand is going to be fixed at 6 times your income. So 6 times 100,000 means you'd be able to borrow 600,000 of residential debt. And if you were investing in investment properties, the DTI is 7. So 7 times the same income would give you 700,000 of debt. So if you wanted a bit of both, you might say you would need 200,000 of income to fund 1.3 million, 100 for the 600,000 on your home, and 100 for the 700,000 of debt.
Great. And that's gross income, Matt?
Yep. And there is a question mark over whether they need to scale the investment income or business income. So they might take 90%, but that is yet to be advised.
Excellent.
So these are proposed rules under the Reserve Bank's consultation paper. They are not in, and they have exemptions, which I'm going to discuss in a moment. 20% of the bank lending can exceed these rules.
Yep.
So, and that's on both sides. So 20% of bank lending can exceed these rules. So that does give the bank some discretion. Along with these, the Reserve Bank is proposing to ease LVRs slightly. So 20% of LVRs will be able to be greater than 80% for owner-occupiers, and that's up from 15%.
Yep. And
investors can have 5% of LVRs above 70%. So this is proposal, so that's up from 65%. So you'll be able to have 70% LVRs as investors, and 5% of lending will be able to exceed that. So looser LVRs that will take some of the pinch of DTIs coming in. I did wonder where these came from, and because I thought, gosh, who's doing this, the government or the Reserve Bank? And it's actually Grant Robertson under the financial remit consulted with the Reserve Bank and said, yep, the Reserve Bank is allowed to bring these DTIs in, and that is part of the broader objectives to support more sustainable house prices. And it's also about bringing in a debt servicing ratio as a guard, if you like, to stop the banks from going off the rails. And they're intended to bite, not at all times in the housing cycle, but at peak times. So when house prices run away because everybody goes crazy and starts buying houses, and interest rates might be low, for example, and so appetites to borrow suddenly emerge. These DTIs are intended to slow down the amount of lending, because you've got to increase your debt, your income has to go up and keep pace. So, in that regard, it will constrain the housing market during boom times. Rest of the time, it shouldn't actually bite too badly, which I think is a constructive thing.
Yep.
Why would they do this? Well, and I'm copying and pasting straight out of their consultation paper. There's a clear link between house price inflation and credit growth. Adrian Orr proved this in 2020 when he dropped rates to 2.5% and loosened LVRs to 80%. And you increase credit and loosen the ratios, Kiwis will go crazy and start dabbling. And post-COVID, that's exactly what happened. So the idea is that if we say, well, you can only have 6 or 7 times your income, then you won't be allowed to go as crazy, and the growth should be more moderate and spread out over time. So that is the idea, and I think it's a good idea in that regard. So they looked at the current investors and current households and looked at the level of the debt to income ratios at the moment as they stand, and they found that at the moment only 20% of investors have debt to income ratios of greater than 7 to 1. So you can see here, first home buyers are right down at 10, but sub 10 for 6 to 1 DTIs, and even less for 7 to 1. And that horizontal line running through the middle is at 20%, and pretty much everybody's under 7 to 1 or 6 to 1, well and truly. So they're making the point that bringing these ratios in will not have much effect on existing borrowers because everybody's below these ratios already.
That actually brings us to a good question there. Alan asks, will it be proposed DTIs for existing lending or new lending only?
We're going to cover that in the exemptions section, but the answer is it's new lending only. Existing lending is exempt. So you'll be able to refinance existing lending and you won't have to qualify for DTIs on it, which is sensible. Yeah. Good question, Alan. So the international experience, which I won't go into too deeply, the international experience has been that house prices still continue to grow after DTIs come in. They're all over the place. In Ireland, it's 3.5 to 4. Czech Republic, 8 to 9. Latvia, 6. Norway, 5. And in all of these countries, the experience after DTIs have come in has been that there has continued to be growth. It's just more moderate and more spread out.
Yep.
So, I don't like regulation. I think the market's efficient and smart and works it out. And no better example than our bankers. But in defence of DTIs, they haven't caused trouble overseas to any great extent. And so I don't think that they're a terrible thing. I don't think we need them, but I don't think they're a terrible thing.
Yep.
I think I'd say that you would observe that the impact by area will be variable. If you're in an area that has very low incomes and high average values, like Queenstown is the poster child for that, but with a DTI down there of about 8 to 1, that's going to be they're above these proposed DTIs because regionally the incomes are low and the asset values are high. But then you'd also observe that people in Queenstown that own houses are rich, probably don't have any debt. And in that respect, 2/3 of New Zealand don't have any home lending. Only 32% of New Zealand has a mortgage because, of course, a bunch of New Zealanders are tenants.
Yep.
And the average DTI across New Zealand is about 3 to 1. So it demonstrates that most people don't care about this. It's people on the margins of lending who are pushing it. Probably our clients, Steve, who are keen
No doubt.
on selling property and pushing it. But DTIs are going to vary by prevailing incomes and house prices by area, and so it won't be the same effect across the country. Auckland's obviously a tough area because assets are so high. So just a few general comments. Exemptions. So old lending is exempt. If you're refinancing your existing debt, DTIs don't cover it. It's new debt that catches you. And when they look at new debt, I think they have to, and I'm guessing, and I've spoken to a few bankers, and this is their opinion, but everybody's guessing because these are draft rules, right? These are consultation paper rules. It's proposed.
Yep.
So you're refinancing your existing loans. You don't want any more money. DTIs don't apply. You want some more money because you want to buy something else. So you want to upgrade your house. You have to now qualify under DTIs. Construction loans and loans for new builds are exempt. That is so important. Otherwise, property development will stop.
It's stopped anyway.
Yeah, that's going to skew the market because everyone's going to buy new builds to get exempt of these rules. So more positivity for new builds, right? With the tax exemptions already there. Bridging finance, Kāinga first home loan schemes are exempt. Business loans are exempt, and commercial property loans are exempt. Huge for commercial property.
Yeah.
So this is another beat up on resi lending. It's not necessarily a bad beat up, but it is not helping secondhand housing in New Zealand. I think the exemptions are all sensible, and they will take the sting out of DTIs. And the way they've been set at 6-1 and 7-1 is sensible. They're not going to come in, sting the market. If suddenly the market ramps up, they can drop them down as a tool and stop the market going crazy and just spread the growth out, which would have been so much better when you think about it with Adrian Orr. If he dropped the rates to 2.5% and had DTIs at 5 or something like that, we would have had more moderate growth, and we wouldn't have had the boom crash. We wouldn't have had to suffer the recession and have all the structural damage from pushing people out of the market, migration to Australia to get away from it, businesses going broke. Wouldn't have had all that structural damage with DTIs in. So I'm not a huge fan of DTIs. I don't want them to come in. I don't think we need the regulation, but there is that argument for them.
Now, Matt, question for you. With 6-1 and 7-1, 6-1 being for owner-occupier property, 7-1 for investors, those are going to act at the same time, correct? So you're going to need to sort of do some calculation and go and figure out what 6-1 is on your family home and 7-1 is on everything else?
Yeah. And so I think what I'll do, an example, I had a lovely client of yours and a client of mine, mutual client in from New Plymouth during the week. She's probably online. She's earning around 60 grand, and she's about 340 grand with a debt. And so at the moment she's compliant, but you bring in DTIs, it's home lending, so she can borrow 6 times 60 grand, 360. She had about 340 grand with a debt, so she's now got liquidity available of 20. She won't be able to borrow more than that.
Right.
Currently, a bank might let her borrow 90% with a low equity loan, 95%, and she can take that out and put that as a deposit on another property, and get on that property ladder and get a second house. Now, okay, a bunch of New Zealanders would say that's terrible, that's risky. We would say that's progressive for that person. 10 years time, that house is going to be worth more. She's not going to go and buy an average house, average rent. She's going to target a high-income property, multi-income stream property. She's going to be smart because she's supervised by you. And so, she's getting ahead, and she won't be able to do that under these rules. So I think what she'll probably do is she'll move out, and then it becomes investment debt. She'll get 7-1, so it's going to be distortionary. You'll see more people moving out of their home and renting it out and that sort of nonsense. And there'll be grey area, like if you've got all your rooms rented out and just one room's you're in it, is that a rental property? So all that stuff's going to come in. It'll be messy.
You'll also get people downgrading to a smaller asset and then buying a bigger rental property with a higher income, because it'll massively distort the DTI that they can borrow.
Yeah. So it's going to change behaviour. I think it's going to be hard, and one of the biggest impacts of it is it's going to be hard for people getting a start. So if you come out of uni, your income's the lowest it's ever going to be, or you're a tradie in your first few years, and you can see a property boom's going on. You're just gagging to jump in there. Previously, it was LVRs holding you back. Now it's LVRs plus DTIs. So great for boomers. Great for us. We're oh, you're a boomer, Steve. I'm not. So.
But all the other rules still exist. You've still got sensible finance rules. You've still got triple CFA. You've still and still the biggest issue that most investors have is servicing, is being able to prove the income that they've got, particularly if self-employed.
Yep. And you look at New Zealand, as I said at the start, we're the envy of the world with our banks, which are relatively unregulated. They have some of the lowest default rates in the world. GFC, we sailed through it. We're sailing through this, relatively speaking. Do you see blood on the street? Do you see mortgagee sales in the banking system? Not really. The default rates are quite low, and that is because we've got LVRs, and the banks test at servicing rates much higher than the prevailing rates in the market. So why are we bringing these in? The bankers are the adults in the room. Actually, all of the instability and the volatilities come out of the Reserve Bank, not the banks. The banks saved New Zealand. So Prudential Lending Code and the senior bankers are actually the ones that have made New Zealand so resilient in recent times. I guess you could argue triple CFA has helped, but the banks were already doing it. That's just interventionist stuff. It's like Muldoon era central government stuff. I don't like it at all. Let the adults in the room run the banks. They protect their shareholder capital. They allocate the capital efficiently. What you're going to see is with these rules, where a banker now would give the benefit of the doubt to a young person, maybe a young professional. They know their income's going to grow. They know they're of solid character. That person would get the benefit of the doubt under current rules. Under DTIs, they're going to have to slot into the 20%. And that 20%, I think, will get sucked up by the fat cats that are pushing it because they're the most profitable members of the bank.
DTI is starting to feel like a safety blanket we don't need, or an airbag we're never going to set off.
Yeah. Just more regulation that's not necessary. You can argue that it has some merit. I'm not saying it has no merit, but I just think it's more regulation. We don't need it, and it's a hangover from the Labor government. The Labor government wanted to regulate everything. It's just not necessary, especially in the banking system.
So how much of the market is it actually going to impact? Because I did the worst analysis on my Facebook page recently and said, could everybody jump online and figure out what their income is, multiply it by 7, and tell us whether they're at the DTI line or not? And hardly anybody was. Nobody was maxed out.
Yeah. Well, I think the distortions will come, right? So if you're on the line, then you suddenly become a property developer because that's exempt.
Right. Yeah.
Claim GST out of your houses. Bang. You're out of them.
Are we ready to look at exemptions then? What is and what isn't exempt then?
Well, I mentioned them. So commercial property loans, business loans, loans for new builds, construction loans. So you take your residential loan and flick it into development, and straight away it's out of DTIs. So there's lots of wiggle room in there, and that's why I'm not too worried about these rules. I think they are set at a level that's sensible, that's not going to impact the market as it is. But actually, if the market goes crazy because they drop interest rates, they can then dial back the activity of the market.
Yep.
So I actually hated these rules for the last 3 weeks, and as I've studied them and thought about them more and more, I'm thinking maybe they're not that bad. But I do feel for people just getting onto the property ladder, it's quite socially regressive in that regard. And I guess the banks would say, well, the 20% is for them, but we'll wait and see where it actually goes.
Well, as you say, somebody with a first income has one form of income. They have a salary, they have a wage, whatever. I look at you and me, and we have multiple incomes. We have salary, we have shares, we have some debt with some rental income coming from it. It's kind of a free ride for for those of us that are more established. It's very hard for the newbies, for people getting stuck in.
So just to repeat, I think one of the biggest positives is the Reserve Bank's going to be able to drop interest rates and control the runaway house price inflation. And I think that's the biggest case for them, quite frankly, because At the moment, they've got this blunt instrument of the OCR. They squash. Our guest is here. If you want to bring him in.
Okay. Not at the backstage yet, so.
Yeah, he's only going to talk for 2 minutes.
Okay.
So I always wonder what's going on with the politicians. So I've invited a politician who's a friend of GRA's. He's about to show up. He says he's backstage, Steve.
No, can't see him from here, sorry.
Can't see him.
Oh, there he is. There he is. Hold on. Do you want me to throw him on?
Yep.
Excellent.
Hi, guys. I hope I'm coming through okay.
Hey, Mr. Seymour, how are you?
Well, thanks. And thanks for hosting me here.
Very good. This is the Honourable David Seymour. Needs no introduction, but he is the head of the ACT Party. David, you may not remember, but Steve Goodey is a friend of mine, and
Oh yeah, nice to see you.
We're discussing DTIs, and I was just saying that I've been hating DTIs for 3 weeks, but in the last sort of week, I've been thinking, oh, maybe they do have a role. Maybe they're not quite so bad. I hate regulation and interference in the market, but you can see some benefits of them for stopping runaway house prices. But I wanted to invite you here to give us ACT's view on DTIs and see where they're going.
Yeah, okay. Well, look, thanks again. A couple of things about what I can and can't do. So I'm part of the government, but the Reserve Bank's independent, and there's a couple of connections. There's the Charter. There's also the financial policy remit that the Minister of Finance gives. So in theory, our government's a coalition. We can say to the Minister of Finance, Nicola Willis, hey, what are you doing about that? So she's sort of got some ways that in theory she could intervene, but not really direct on something as specific as DTIs. So I think that's the first thing that I know people will say, well, this is, Labor want to regulate everything. It's a hangover from Labor. Yep, you can make that argument. They did appoint Adrian Orr. I'm sure that they have influenced the tone of the government and its policies, even the Reserve Bank to some extent after 6 years in power.
It's great because Grant Robertson gave them that remit, didn't they, in 2021? So
that's right. So right now, yeah, right now they're under a financial policy remit set by Grant Robertson. That's also true. So in some indirect ways, the government of the day can influence them, but it's basically a good thing that monetary policy, if you saw the decision today, and prudential policy that we're talking about now, is done by the bank, and it's independent from the politicians of the day. Because if you think it's bad now, believe me, it could have been worse. In fact, in Muldoon's days, it actually was. So I just say that not as an excuse, but just because those are the basic facts, and I don't want to get people saying, well, why don't you change this? We've set up a system where politicians are one step removed and have some indirect ways of doing it. So in one sense, what I think about it doesn't matter a huge amount. But since you asked, I'll just give you a couple of thoughts. I mean, one is that the headline's pretty shocking, because I just kind of sit there and think, what do people I know in Auckland earn? What is their people I know who might be first home buyers earn? And I know my 7 times tables, and I know that they ain't going to have a house anytime soon. Yeah. And it's hard to believe that, a Reserve Bank would do that. And yet, sounds like you've got to, from the bit of the discussion I heard, there are a few exemptions. There are proposed changes to the LVR at the same time. So the practical effect on first home buyers may not be as bad as it sounds if you just get out with your 7 times tables and say, well, that doesn't stack up.
Because you add your rent to your income there, and so that adds cumulatively up and makes it a bit easier.
Yeah, so I just give people a bit of pause that it's worth looking at the nuance of it, and in fairness, the Reserve Bank is consulting. They're not going to announce anything till mid-year. The second point I'd make is that while they've got every opportunity to do this, it's not up to me to judge them or direct them. It seems to me that we have another example of policy that is really treating the symptom. I think there's a big, obviously in this particular forum, people will be pretty pleased with the growth in property prices over the last 20 years. But I really, well, probably less so in that period. Yep,
Yeah.
fair.
Yeah.
Um,
It's minus 20%. Yeah. So.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I bought in March 2021, so I've got more than a passing interest in recent property price trends. However,
should have come to GRA.
Well, you probably would have told me that there's no time like today. But in any event, so obviously, while people were generally pretty keen in this group for property prices to appreciate, and I understand that, I worry about what this means for New Zealand's long-term social cohesion, because if you've got a group of young people sitting there saying, well, actually, I don't see a pathway to being part of this society, then they're going to do one of two things, either move to Australia or vote Green. And to be honest, it'd be safer if they moved to Australia. That's the ultimate concern you got there.
Did you hear my comments around that person migrating to Australia that Celeste met this morning? Did you
I didn't. No. What was that?
Just a doctor that's a client of ours was writing a reference for one of their friends, and there was a tick box in the form, would you be interested in migrating to Australia? Ticked it out of interest. Recruiter rang them, immediately offered them a job, double their New Zealand income, less hours, no weekend work.
Yep. So that's one of the realities we face, right? So, like, first of all, you want the next generation to see a pathway. And if we don't make it easier to build homes, that's not going to work. But just about everything that every government's tried up until now, I hope, if ACT gets its way on a few things, every government has basically tried to treat the symptoms, LVRs, DTIs, special home grants. They've fiddled. They've put, taxes on landlords, tried to punish landlords in a whole lot of ways, actually. And that fundamentally doesn't change the fact that there are more people than houses. You can change, the advantages or disadvantages of different people in the community in the short run, but you can't change that long run problem. So fundamentally, we're not into demand side measures in housing. It's been a massive waste of time and annoyed a lot of people. And a lot of that stuff we're now reversing. You see the Bright Line test pretty soon. You'll see an announcement around the details of mortgage interest deductibility. You'll see landlord changes. And so we're going to dismantle a lot of the demand side stuff, then start doing the infrastructure funding and financing, the RMA, the things that allow you to actually solve the real problem, which is building more housing. So I just make that comment about this is another demand side, symptom treating policy. And I just make one other comment before I run, because I've got to go. But the example of your Aussie doctor, or soon to be Aussie doctor. The issue is New Zealand's in a bit of a hole because we need to be wealthier, we need to have lower taxes, and we need to find a competitive advantage somewhere that makes people want to come here, bring their skills, stay here, and have a future. And it seems to me the one thing we've got is that we've got a really nice climate overall. If you've been to Perth, then you probably think, actually, not sure I do want more heat and sunshine on balance. And then you say, well, look, we've got great natural beauty, the ability to have sand between your toes, grass between your toes. I mean, for a lot of kids growing up around the world, that's an unimaginable luxury. For Kiwi kids, it's pretty normal.
No crocodiles, no spiders, no sharks, no jellyfish.
No Australians. I mean, there's very few Australians. All of that. Yeah. So what's the big competitive advantage we can give? This is a place where it's easy to build a home. And yet over the last 30 years, we have conspired to do just about everything possible to make it as difficult as possible in a place that should have the big competitive advantage of, look, New Zealand, it's isolated, small population, few drawbacks, but go there because you'll get a house. And that's how we get those doctors, and we actually manage to get more productivity, more economic growth, allows us to provide the social services we need and lower taxes. So if we don't get that infrastructure, land use, consenting, building part right, then we're basically giving up probably the one big advantage that we have as a society. Anyway, there endeth the sermon.
Good sermon.
That's where we got to be going.
Yeah, and on behalf of GRA, thank you very much for coming and listening. GRA are big ACT fans. We promoted ACT at the last election because we think David is the voice of reason. Thank you, David, for coming.
As do I.
Okay.
Have a great night.
Thanks very much. Good night. See you. Bye. Well, that was good. There's a bonus.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sorting that out, Matt. Yeah. Big ACT fan. Last time I met him, I was interviewing his co-leader in the Beehive just before the election and had a quick word with him. But so a lot of sense going on there. A lot of practical
He can be quite sharp if you disagree with him. He can be quite sharp. He bites. He bites. I've had a couple of cross-sword sessions with him.
And that's what we need, and he's not wrong. How many trees do we grow, and yet we can't build bloody houses?
Yeah. Well, do you know what he was going to announce? He was going to talk about then. He was talking about the edges of it. Right. They're yanking the chain out from under brands. I've heard it through my client base. So brands is going to be smashed because there's such a conflict of interest. The owners of brands, the controllers of brands are the suppliers. There's they're pulling that apart, is what I've heard, and big changes at KO as well. So I am.
Well, with KO being under such investigation themselves, I mean, you were talking about John Key earlier, and it feels like John Key was the last commercially logical leader we had in this country, in all reality.
Oh yeah, he was awesome. Yep, and he. Yep. So I was running my way through my list, but we might move to tax. I think I've done it. I've talked about roller coaster interest rates and the problems with those in our Reserve Bank governor. What can you do to prepare? So if you're on the edge of your servicing limits, you might need more funding. You want to do it before DTIs arrive, because once DTIs arrive, it'll get much harder. You might want to look at non-bank lenders. Looks like I'm on my own. Steve disappeared. Oh no, there he is.
So exemptions for non-bank lenders. So second and third tier lenders are exempt from these rules the same way LVR restrictions.
And any bank that's not regulated by the Reserve Bank, like GM Home Loans.
So there's some big holes in this, the same way there was with tax deductibility and LVRs then.
Yeah, but those non-bank lenders, they're about 0.7 higher than the main bank lenders. So you pay for it, but you'll get out of regulation by doing that.
Yeah.
And I would just say the early bird gets the worm. If you are in that 20% of investors where you're exceeding 7-1, you want to be talking to your bankers earlier, not later, if you feel you need more. So I think these are unnecessary, these rules. I don't like regulation. I like to leave it to the adults in the room. We don't need the government telling our bankers what to do. They're doing a great job in New Zealand. But as far as making the best of the worst of it, these rules coming in, they're actually pretty good. And I don't think they're going to have a terrible impact. And they may actually provide some welcomed controls when we have rampant house price inflation, and they're going to let the government drop interest rates. I almost sound like I like them, don't I?
Yeah, but also, as they bring DTIs in, they're also removing non-deductibility right through to 2025. I think the last of it comes off.
Well, that's next time.
Yeah, sorry, preempting you. Go.
No, that's one of those good points. So the quick précis of the government changes on the table at the moment. So Brightline National are saying they'll reduce the period to 2 years. They've made a media release, no detail. The devil's going to be in the detail.
Yep.
We are asking at GRA is, will it be dropped across the board on all property with retrospective effect? Most likely, but it could be grandfathered in where you get stuck with the rules at time of acquisition. So if you bought a property prior to the rule change, if you own property now, do you maintain that 10-year historic?
Which is most likely. Let's be fair.
No, I think they're not going to do that based on what they've said. Yeah, I think they're going to.
When have they ever not?
Well, they philosophically, I think that it's wrong. This is a backdoor capital gains tax. It's capital gains tax and drag. The Nats think that it should be 2 years. I've actually argued with Paul Goldsmith and Chris Bishop and said it should be 5 years because it gets all the clandestine traders and that's a good middle ground. But no, they're in it too. So I actually think that's going to be welcomed relief. It's proposed to come in 1 July 2024. We're at the 28th of Feb. So the detail has not been announced, but that's on the table right now. We don't know enough to comment, but that should be a positive. The next thing is interest on deduction rules, which you just mentioned, Steve. These have been announced by the coalition to be phased out from actually this year. That line one of that is actually incorrect. The coalition announced that this financial year would be 60% deductible from 1 April 2023. That was the headline. Then 80% from 1 April 2024, next month, and then 100% from 1 April 2025. So that was a year early, and a year earlier than we were expecting. So that was great. But then Nicola Willis is saying that the timing on this is being discussed, and they're going to push it back potentially. That's being discussed in cabinet. So I was listening to David then, seeing if he was going to give us a heads up on what that's going to be.
No, it's fine for her now. She's sold her house.
Yeah. So the devil's going to be in the detail of this. Timing may be plus 1 year, and what happens to historic interest deductions denied? Are they going to release them? Because you've got a bunch of rentals that are away. They haven't let me deduct them. Are they going to So are they going to give them to us? We'll find out. That's lots of questions. So the trust tax rate, Nicola Willis has picked up the Labor implemented proposed change of the trust tax rate going to 39%, and so this is supposed to be from 1 April 2024, and right up until yesterday, everybody that has retained earnings in companies owned by trusts that are taxed at 28% has been declaring dividends and flowing them up into their trusts so that they pay the 5% top-up tax rate between the company and the trust tax rate, which is currently 33. So the current tax rate, 33 of trusts, it's going to 39. Everybody's flowing the earnings up so they don't have to pay 11%, they pay 5%, which is the current difference in the tax rates. And then Nicola Willis last night came out with something very helpful. It recognises what CANS, which is Chartered Accountants Australia and New Zealand, our professional body for chartered accountants, lobbied for. They went in and lobbied for a 2-tier rate that recognises that actually most of the beneficiaries of New Zealand, 80%, are not exposed to the $180,000 tax rate. I think it's 19% are exposed to that $180,000 tax bracket in aggregate for the families. So why are we forcing trusts where the average tax rate of the beneficiaries would be under 180 to pay tax on 39%? So Willis has been receptive to that, and she has said that they're looking at a 2-tier rate, which will allow trusts to flow income or receive income below a threshold at 33% potentially, and then above a threshold at 39%. So that will be very helpful. What is unhelpful is we're a month from the end of the financial year, and we don't know whether we should declare dividends for our clients or not, because we don't have detail of this stuff. So it's not helpful.
Crazy.
But good on the Nats for doing that. They're listening to feedback and being responsive. So that's good. So these are 2-tier rates for the 2025 financial year, and it's a very good thing. I've just explained that, so it's a very good thing. A 2-tier system will help taxpayers in New Zealand. And that's it. That's my lot.
Fantastic. That's some really interesting stuff. And thank you so much for your speaking.
Seymour's always good. Yeah.
Oh, so good.
What's happening at your event, Steve? You've got a boot camp, is that right?
We do, yeah. So really, once or twice a year, we put on a very big boot camp for property investors. We try to get 350, 400 property investors in a room and get yourself, Dave Windler, some of the best speakers in the country to come on. And obviously, we've got this going on the 17th of March, so it's coming up fairly shortly. We can only get 300 people in the room. We've already got well over 200 tickets booked. We've called it previously the Cash Flow Bootcamp. We've changed that a little bit to the Succeed in Property Bootcamp this year, just to recognise how much of the new content we've actually changed, rewritten, because there's just, as you say, like tonight, there's just so many new rules and things that we have to take into consideration now. And we are looking at this as a major update to the property market. So massively upgraded for 2024. We are hoping to have more of the detail that you're actually talking about, but we want to show people exactly where it is that us and our clients are actually making money in property at the moment. And that's exactly why we've got you to come along and speak as well, Matt, because I think portfolios will transform quite a lot in 2024. I don't think the way that you and I made money in the last few years will work for the next few years. And so we need to look at everything fresh and new again. And so that's exactly what we're doing with rewriting so much of the content that we're putting on. So,
actually, Steve, you've worked with companies in the past that I've also worked with, and that was their failings. They didn't change their strategy. as the market conditions change. It used to be you'd go and buy a house in Otara for 30 grand, then they were 60 grand, then they were 120 grand. I've seen this in my career. Then they're 240 in at all stages. People were saying this is crazy, it's not going to work. And then they got to 1.2 million last year and it didn't work.
Yep.
And so you need to do something else. And you guys change your strategy with the market conditions. I like it.
Oh, we change it with every event. No two events are ever the same, because when I bought my first house for $80,000, something, 28, 29 years ago, I had to put down a $7,000 deposit. And now first home buyers are putting down $750,000 for an awful house, and they have to come up with $200,000 up front. And so the strategy has to change. You can't just keep doing the same thing and expecting to get the same result when the market's changing so quickly, which is why we're going to grab 6 or 7 of our clients that we're working with who are actually buying houses right now and how they're doing it, and put them on stage with a microphone as well as an investor panel, so that the people that come to the event as well can actually see from people, because it's easy to imagine that Steve and Matt can buy houses, but people want to see what the everyman's doing and how they're doing it out there in the marketplace. And we want to show that as well. So it's a full day, and it is a complete boot camp. Boot camp in the sense that we are physically there to teach people how to do this stuff and show them how we're doing it. So we're bringing in the relevant experts. Obviously, Matt, we've got you coming along, and you'll be able to expand on a lot of the stuff that you've spoken about this evening, and also talk a lot more about taxes and structures and remaining safe, because a big part of wealth creation isn't the creation part, it's actually keeping it, and keeping it intergenerationally as well. And I know that all of and all of the presenters and speakers that we'll have on stage have their own children now starting to buy their own investment properties, and a lot of those kids and that next generation will actually come along and be at the event as well. And that's something that's really close to my heart, after having helped my son at 20 buy his first property as well. And I know that it's important to Dave Windler, who'll be our lending specialist on the day, figuring out how you can borrow money to buy investment properties. And he'll actually be standing on stage and presenting that along with his son, who is a mortgage broker with him as well. So
that's such a good thing to do for your kids. I've got an 18-year-old and a 12-year-old, and I bought them rental properties 3 years ago. And when they come out of uni, the growth on those properties means they can sell them, buy their first home.
Yep.
And it's cost me nothing. Doing exactly what you guys do: buy, renovate, revalue, recycle, take the money out, and then let the house go up in value. It costs me nothing. Free ride for the kids.
And you're preparing those kids for being wealthy and for creating their own wealth and having financial resilience, something that the school system in this country just entirely ignores. Hugely important.
Being responsibility. I've got my son, one of his houses is mouldy, and he's looking at me like I'm going to go and sort it out. I'm like, that's your job.
You own it. And the next thing too is obviously that if you're a part-time or a full-time property investor, you just don't get a Christmas party. You don't have a network normally. And so what we like to do with this event too is really heavily promote actually networking with other people. So we have tables of 10 people. You'll be sitting with random other property investors. You'll be having chats with them during the break. And we want to promote that idea. Bring along a pile of business cards. Introduce yourself to the 10 people around you. And to make that happen even more, I'm going to buy you lunch if you come along to this event. We're going to put lunch on so you don't have to leave the room. You don't have to go and find a little cafe somewhere. And you can sit there with a plate of food and actually have a really good chat to the other people around you, because you might be a buy and hold investor, and you might be sitting there next to a developer who can help you out and help you understand how they're doing what they're doing. And the network that you create out of an event like that is nearly as important as the information that you will be delivered as well. Now, in an important announcement that I haven't said before, I've also got Ed McKnight coming along. Now, you might know Ed as the person who runs one of the busiest business podcasts in New Zealand history. They have millions of downloads. I've just been on there for my second time. Ed McKnight and Andrew Nicol, who work at OPS Partners and work with property investors every day. Ed's going to come along and do a market update and tell you exactly what they're up to and what they're doing and how they're doing it. And this is a new speaker and something that they haven't launched or released to anybody else yet. This guy talks really fast. You'll have to keep up. and he is a lot like Matthew here, where I love the way he talks and I love the content he gives because he's just never wrong. He is very, very sharp guy. And
That's kind. I am wrong sometimes, Steve. Just to correct you there.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually got a list here, but I wasn't going to mention it.
But Ed's bloody good. I've only recently connected to those guys. We're given, pretty sure we're given tax advice to some of their boys, but Ed's on the money. I like him.
He's sharp. He's an economist who also invests, much like yourself, an accountant who also invests. He's a very tidy guy. Now, obviously, there's always going to be an offer coming along, and we want to do a really, really beastie webinar offer for my clients who are online tonight, my people from my database, and also the massive amount of GRA people that are online tonight as well. And we want to give you an advantage because you took action and showed up tonight. We had nearly 600 people online tonight, and it was great to have a guest speaker and have that surprise pop-up. But the offer that we're going to do tonight is going to also include, for anybody that's not a GRA client currently, a $500 gift pack, essentially, of an initial meeting with GRA. Now, I've had these. I've recommended them to all of my clients, and I send people through to this who pay this sort of money every week to sit down with one of the GRA associates or partners and figure out exactly what and if anything they need to protect themselves and their wealth and their equity for themselves and future generations. I think this product as such is a must-have for every investor. There's no commitment to this whatsoever. It's just a sit down and a chat. They do it usually via Google Meet or Skype or online, so you don't have to actually physically be at your office. And we're going to do that free for anybody that buys a ticket to my event tonight, but only to people that are not current GRA clients. What we are going to do for everybody is give you a 100% guarantee that if you come along to this event, sit there for the day, turn up, listen to the content and listen to the education that we provide, and if you don't learn something, if you earnestly feel that you knew everything that you heard, and we don't give you that one aha moment where you go, actually, Steve, that's bloody useful, then we will give you 100% your money back. You can watch the entire event start to finish, go home and email me afterwards, and I will refund your money if you are not happy. That's how confident we are that we have new and interesting content that you have never heard before that should be of great value to you as a property investor. So here's the deal we've got. We've got 50 tickets. We've got 100 tickets left. So we've got 50 tickets for the people on the webinar tonight, first in, first best dressed, and we will give you 50% off the ticket price. Now, we've got a link here that will automatically take you through to the booking page and give you the 50% discount. All you need to do, step one, is go to stevegoodey.com/webinar. It automatically loads and it applies the 50% discount for people that have been on this webinar tonight. The link is been put into the comments section there, so you should just be able to click on that, go across to the page, and be able to get that discount right now. And then all you do is come along to the event, learn in full steam, and we will show you everything that's going on in 2024 in property and show you why cash flow is so important at the moment. Show you all of the loopholes for loan-to-value ratio restrictions, for DTIs, show you all the loopholes for tax deductibility, show you why nobody should not consider buying a new home, but what are the shortfalls of that and how does it affect your portfolio? I've also got a very, very new piece to the presentation that I'm halfway through writing at the moment, which is about not managing a portfolio, but building one from scratch. What should house number one look like? What should number two look like? How do you get to 10 houses, 20, 100? How does your life change? How does your lending change? How do your structures, entities, tax change when your portfolio is brand new, small, medium, large, huge, and how that should look for you as well? So that's the deal. stevegoodey.com/webinar. You run over there right now. For the first 50 people, you get a 50% discount and come along to the event. Now, the last thing that I was going to say is that this was supposed to be a 3-part webinar series. I had a suggestion come to me via Messenger today, and I agree with it. We are going to do a 4th webinar, and it's going to be getting started in property investing for absolute newbies. This is for somebody who's never owned a house before or owns their family home and no rental properties, or family home and they accidentally have a rental property. We're going to work on a webinar next week to walk you through, 6th of March, 7:30, walk you through actually being a brand new property investor. Now, I'm going to launch that on my Facebook page give you guys a link as well so you can register for that and give you some reminders as well. If that sounds like you and you want to be the first guy, the starter guy, jump on that one as well. In the meantime, what Matthew and I are going to do while you guys are grabbing your tickets to that is we're going to go through some of the questions that you've posted and have a quick look there and roll through, see if I can find any curly ones that Matt can't answer because he loves it when I do that. Let's have a look.
Opening the fridge, Steve.
That's why I muted myself earlier. When a DTI is proposed to come in, if it is brought in, will it be this financial year, next financial year? Where does it sit?
It's calendar year and middle of the year. Good question. I should have covered that. Middle of the year, it would be the earliest. So they're going to go through. They're going through the consultation process, and I think the Reserve Bank are gagging to reduce interest rates, and so they'll want to bring these in quite quickly. But middle of the year is when they're expecting. What was that?
Do you think they're smart enough to know that this is a way of getting interest rates to come down?
Oh, I think they are. Yeah. They are.
Okay. Another question here from Richard. Is it likely people with large portfolios of significant debt will be reluctant to sell as they won't be able to get further lending?
Interesting you asked that because I've been debating that. I have a reasonable amount of debt, Celeste and I, between us. And, we thought, maybe we should sell some, leave some powder dry, so that if there is a bit of a correction, we can buy back in. And so we've been debating that for the last month. And then we sort of concluded that we shouldn't, because I think the Reserve Bank's cornered. They have to drop rates. Yep. They're grinding Kiwis. It's very unpopular. They're leaving, going overseas. They're going broke. They have to drop rates.
Yeah.
And as John Key said this morning, you drop the rates, house price is going to go. So they're cornered, right? So this is a tool that lets them drop rates and control house price inflation. So I don't think we should be dumping assets at the moment. But it's what do I know? That's just my educated guess. Talk to your bankers and your brokers.
I think it'll be interesting too. It'll be an apples for apples thing. I think that sometimes people will go, look, I'm nudging that 7 times limit. I can't go and buy a new property at the moment. They'll look at second tier lending and not be appeased by the interest rates, not like that very much. So they'll possibly do a portfolio review and they'll look at any assets they've got that are past Brightline test. They're not going to be taxed on it, and the lowest rental return they can possibly get, and they might exit that investment to go and buy a better quality investment if the market sort of turns a little bit. I think that could be a way for people to sort of get out and get back in again.
Yeah.
And it's only going to trigger possibly a 2-year Brightline at that stage, which should be a lot.
These questions are really situational, Steve, and it's got to be bespoke to the household. So a household that has fixed incomes and is on the outer margins of their capabilities, they might sell.
Yep.
They might cash up because they're at risk. More sophisticated investors that can switch the debt across into property development or repurpose it over commercial property. I can do that. I'm a developer. I've got commercial property. I can repurpose and shift debt and get it away. Also we took 5-year fixed interest contracts. So we've still got 2.5 years to go at 3%. So it's not biting. So for us, in our circumstances, we're not concerned. We think that rates are going to drop down. But if you're sitting on 8% and you're stressed to hell, then it might make sense to de-gear.
Yeah, particularly if you're sitting on 8% with a 4% returning asset, and you can and prices start to reduce, and you can start getting an 8% returning asset. It might be tempting. Just to mention that people are bounding through and grabbing their tickets now. JB's got a ticket. Dean's got a ticket. Madalena's got a ticket. Trevor's grabbed theirs. It's about 10 tickets down now. So if you're sitting there waiting to grab your ticket to the event, now would absolutely be a great time. I think this question is going to be kind of typical and topical of what we're talking about there as well.
Non-bank lenders.
Yeah.
Debt repurposing. So, got debt on your home. Non-bank funding, non-bank lenders, So Gem Home Loans was one. Resimac, I think. I don't use them. But David Windler is all over this stuff. Go and talk to David Windler.
Yeah. He's had some very, very smart conversations with people recently, and like he's very good at taking an asset out of a portfolio and making it debt free, so that you can take it second tier, so you can buy the new property and then take that new property from second tier to first tier within a year or two. Once it sort of settles down in your portfolio, as you say, slightly higher cost, but it gets it done. And it enlarges your portfolio.
You got to watch tax deductibility on that sort of stuff, don't you?
Correct. Okay. Yeah, if it's existing stock, but I mean that's changing as well. And once again, there's a lot of exemptions, and it's filters, but amongst filters, it's incredible.
Then if the second tier lender is, so the question is, does DTI apply to second tier lending? Ben, if the second tier lender is not regulated by the Reserve Bank, and most of them aren't, then you're away. But main bank lenders, which are regulated, they do second tier lending. So if you're dealing with BNZ, one of my bankers, they do a lot of second tier stuff. As past, they'll do first and seconds with different divisions. They're regulated. But if you're using that money for new builds or construction or commercial property, then it's exempt. So it doesn't apply. So generally, if you're dealing second tier, I don't think it'll apply, because unless you're using second tier to buy and hold residential housing. And even then, if you're refinancing existing debt, it doesn't apply. So there's so many exemptions.
And even then, like we've got a lot of Australian banks in New Zealand who are starting second tier lenders and lending money. So ANZ, for instance, might be lending money to a smaller lender that's outside of those rules and criteria. So it's kind of the Wild West out there at the moment for those second tiers, which is great for investors. We've also had tickets picked up by Nikki. Thanks very much. Great to see you. Peter's coming along. Peter, you've been before. I know that name as well. So everybody's grabbing their tickets, which is fantastic. Still on the page there. Here's a question for you. If you co-own an investment property with someone, 100% debt and income will be allocated to you then when calculating DTI. I'm not sure what the question is there, but yeah. But
I think they're asking about the apportionment, and I think that it comes down to the percentage you own. So the banks could do this two ways. They could allocate 100% to each of you. But with my lending, they pro-rata it. So if I'm 50-50 with Steve in a company and owns an investment property, they attribute 50% to me and 50% to Steve for the obligation. So that they work out the income of the entity, and then they attribute the shortfall, if any, 50-50. That's on existing rules. So DTIs, it's different, but I think they'll have a similar mechanism. It would be logical to do that. But no one knows, Autumn, because these are the details that will come out of policy at the later stages of it being developed. But I think they attribute.
Yeah, and so are they going to scale rental income for the case of these DTIs, or are they going to use 100% gross rental income, do you think?
No one knows. I asked 3 banks. No one knows.
Yep. Details. Currently renting and investing all new builds. Don't own my own house currently. On that existing lending, my DTI is under 7-1. So does it mean I can't buy my own house under proposed DTIs? Oof, tricky. There's going to be a hard calculation to be had there somewhere, isn't there? That's what I was saying before. It's not straightforward at all. It's confusing.
So I think you're wanting new debt to buy a home. So they'll look at a debt to income ratio of 6-1 on the new debt for your family home.
Yep.
And if your existing properties are new builds, they'll be exempt. So DTIs will apply to the new debt on your home.
And it's likely to be a situation where a new purchase is going to mean that you need to bring all DTIs and LVRs and everything else into line for banking rules if you're using first tier lending. Well, this is going to become more and more important to go and see a mortgage broker like Dave Windler, Chris Peterson out of your office, whoever it might be, and they'll sit down and look at absolutely everything you've got and figure out how to restructure it to achieve what it is that you're trying to get. So I think it's just going to become more and more important.
Yeah, it's a tricky question. I don't know the answer. Good question, Andrew.
It's tough when you've got no detail whatsoever.
Well, the bankers don't know yet, so how do we know? It's not a consultation. and it's still in consultation.
They're still making it up their mind. It reminds you of the Labor government where it was, they're making decisions based on a popularity contest. They're reading the front page of the Herald before they make a decision on it.
But they didn't win the popularity contest with me or property investors, that's for sure.
No.
I remember running a workshop in 2021, post that second election, and they brought in interest deductibility. I've never been so angry in a webinar. I was frothing at the bit because they said we won't change taxes. We're gonna change Brightline, and I think they were changing the upper tax bracket to 39, and that was it. And Heather Duplessis-Allen interviewed Grant Robertson, and he said no, I won't change it, and then brought in interest non-deduction. And he said, well, it's not a new tax, it's a modification of an existing tax.
I think I might have been on that webinar with you, and I'm sitting here like not getting a word in, trying to go, well, he's either going to pass out or he's going to take a breath in a minute.
I was half an inch from throwing shit across the room. I was so angry. Yeah. That's actually when we reached out to Seymour, and we reached out to the Nats. Nats didn't reply, annoyed the crap out of us. Seymour straight back and said, yeah, this is a betrayal. And that's when GRA connected with Seymour, and we got behind him because he was so responsive. He's really good for investors. He's driving the revision of these interest non-deduction rules. He's driving the revision of tenancy rules to allow no cause terminations to come back. There's some other PC name for it, but essentially kick a tenant out without giving them a reason. And you want to do that if your tenant is threatening the neighbours or making noise. You don't want to go to the tenancy tribunal and fight with them. You just want to say, okay, we've had enough, see you later. And then they know it's a veiled threat and they behave. But landlords are disempowered under the Labor rules. So he's kicking that out. KO hates it. It's disastrous for them. So
as you know, I had a rental property recently where I had to evict the tenant for not paying rent. They lit the house on fire on the way out. You can't make this up. And they're taking me to the tenancy tribunal because they want their bond back.
Well,
I had a $40,000 bill for fixing the property. Insurance obviously covers it, but come on. Now, we're just going to hop more ticket sales come through. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Ross. See you there. Mel, Gareth has grabbed a ticket. Michael's grabbed a ticket. And that takes us to 26. So we're about half finished of the 50 half-price tickets. So if you're still working on grabbing that ticket, then jump in there. Absolutely.
I had a rental property in Memphis, Steve. Remember we were in Memphis together?
Yes.
And, the FBI blew up one of my houses. So that was hilarious. One of my tenants was on the FBI's most wanted list. So they smashed the front door and threw stun grenades in and blew the windows out and trashed the house. Just after
Manjit asks, if you sell a property, will your debt need to be reduced to fulfill DTI rate? So basically, if you sell a property and exit an investment, will they have to straighten up the DTIs? This is another one of these we don't have any details things.
But this is exempt because it's existing debt.
Yeah, got you. Yeah, so no, basically, yeah.
Yeah, no. But the bank might take it under Prudential Lending Code and think you're overgeared.
Yeah. Any thoughts on this one then? How are DTIs proposed to apply to a situation where you have multiple entities, residential owned company owned by family trust? Is it going to cross those different entities, or are they going to look at the one person globally?
Yeah, I think that they'll just look at it as a group and take your percentage pro rata share. So if your trust owns 50% and your mate's trust owns 50, your trust will have 50% attributed to it. That would be logical. And that's how Prudential Lending Code runs it as it is. So if you add DTIs into that Prudential Lending Code, it should follow through, I would imagine.
Yeah.
If you really want to nail that down, like if under the loan documents you're jointly and severally liable, then each of you are 100% liable. But if you are proportionately liable under the loan documents, then it would be forced to be that way. But actually, I find the banks look at it practically and they say, well, two functioning parties, they can each pay their half share. So they practically take half and half. That's what I find in my commercial lending for resi.
Yeah. Great. Another great question here. What do you think, Matt?
It's your event, Steve. You decide.
Yeah, absolutely. Bring them along. We've had babies crying in the back of the room. It's a generational event, I mean, we're bringing Dave Windler, and he's much older than Matt and I, so I mean, that's only fair, right? He's not listening tonight. What other questions have we got?
Nearly my bedtime, Steve.
Sorry, mate.
Just last week,
4 or 5 more tickets just sold just then. People grabbing the last set tickets. We've still got 350 odd people online listening to these answers. So,
because they all walked away and watched TV. There's no one online.
Just you and me there.
They forgot to shut down.
How did you buy your kids' properties? Did you put them in a trust in their name, sort of thing?
Yep. So formed 2 trusts, one for each child. Made those trust beneficiaries of my family trust, and lent money to the family trusts for the deposits. And then the trusts lend the money down to a company owned 50-50 between the 2 trusts. So choice of investment vehicle was a company, because with interest on deduction, choice of the day really what was companies, because you want to mitigate your tax down to 28%. Low interest rate environment, no interest deductions. You want to be at 28%. And then I want to be able to declare shareholders' salaries to the kids. So 1 share in each name in the company for work done. You've got to watch the minor beneficiary rules and trusts. So you didn't think the question was that complex, did you? You got to watch the minor beneficiary rules.
I know what the answer would be. The answer would be grab a ticket to my event, get a free consultation with GRA, and they'll tell you exactly how to do it. Because as you said before, it's never simple. And the answer that you've just given would probably not suit that person, because the sort of stuff that you're doing is so incredibly bespoke, because there might be an ex-wife or a half cousin or it's everybody's situation is so incredibly different. And you don't know.
The other thing is you got to think about what happens when things change. So, we could make that company LTC and run the income through to the trust and distribute it as the kids get a bit older. So you're thinking ahead as well as the current circumstances. But a trust owning a couple of trusts owning a company, 2 rentals in the company, that's the answer, Jane.
Yeah. And I'll answer this one for you as well. If you've already bought a ticket and you would like to have a sit down, have a chat with GRA, just send me an email, stephen@stephengoodey.com, or message me on Messenger. And if you've already bought a ticket to my event, I'll do my very best to plug you in with Matt and his team. It just might not be before the event, because I know that Matt's incredibly busy at the moment. His lead-in time has gone out a lot, because there's a lot of people thinking about this stuff right at the moment and moving it along. But get in touch with me.
Actually, Steve, the market's waking up. Everyone knows interest rates are going to drop. John Keyes in the paper is on breakfast this morning saying interest rates are going to drop second half of the year. Probably is going to go up. So I think everyone's working it out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely they are. Excellent. What else we got here? Thanks, Stephen Mayer. A lot of love for you bringing our friend on as our guest speaker tonight. That was fantastic. Great to hear some stuff from the horse's mouth. Here's a good one for you, Matt. You're going to love this one. Crystal balls. What's happening with house prices this year and next year? What are you thinking?
I think Tony Alexander is a year out. I think that I'd say flat first 6 months. There's still no liquidity. I think developers are not going to be able to develop because bank funding's been withdrawn, because capital adequacy ratios have changed for the banks and the rates are going up, and there's a whole bunch of stuff going on, restructuring inside banks at the moment. So liquidity is going to be tight. Interest rates are going to stay high. Lots of uncertainty. Yet rents are going to go through the roof, and second half that'll spin around. Rates will start to ease off. There'll be catch up dropping of the interest rates, possibly DTIs in, and that's going to create confidence through all sectors in New Zealand. Households will feel the pressure coming off them as they've got more liquidity through lower interest rates, and there'll just be a wave of feel good coming back into the economy as rates drop away, and that'll really take off next year. So this year, muted growth. Next year, lots of growth.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think 5% this year, 10% next year, something along those lines. Yeah. And the reason for that being that just because people can't buy houses doesn't stop them from wanting to buy houses. And so if interest rates are high and funding's hard and bank liquidity is not great, there is a pent-up demand situation where people want to buy houses. As soon as they can, they jump in. And I think that we've seen that. We've seen that a lot. Hey, look, I'm not going to keep you here all night, Matt. You're a bear down and you probably want to go home for your dinner. I just want to thank you profusely for your support of my event and obviously for the great information and the guest speaker on the webinar tonight. I think we're 41 ticket sales into the 50 that we had available for tonight's webinar. And so if anybody else is online tonight, there's all the information. All you got to do is go to stevegoodey.com/webinar and we will teach you an incredible amount of stuff on the 17th of March at Eden Park. But in the meantime, thanks, Matt. As always, bloody great to work with you.
And you. Thanks for inviting GRA. We always appreciate working with you. Thank you.